Good morning, students. So I found myself under the sea, under the Studio Ghibli sea anyway. No, I will not be singing you songs from The Little Mermaid, even though I can. Actually, I don't know if I can keep that promise, but I'm going to try. So good morning. The first thing I want to go over with you guys is looking at phase 2 of our found poem. Last time we started phase 1 when we were in the hunt and gather phase for our poem. And today we're going to take a look at phase 2, which is the arrange phase. But I want to bring us back to my buddy Louis, the Mr. Louis Armstrong. Again, his hobby, one of them anyway, is using a lot of Scotch tape to pick out different things during what I read and piece them together and make a little story of my own. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, you're welcome. That's the guy. For those of you that still don't know who Louis Armstrong is, that's the guy whose voice sounds like that. You're welcome. Anyway, today we are actually going to start laying down some Scotch tape, and Scotch tape as a analogy is really helpful because it's a tape you can actually still kind of get up. It's a little stickier than that blue painter's tape that you see, but if you don't like the way you arrange something with Scotch tape, there's a chance you could still move it around. We're not committing with duct tape. There's no crazy glue involved, but today is really taking the material and putting some tape down as we look at the arrangement phase of this. So here we go. We already did the hunting and gathering. Today's about arranging. Next time will be the show and tell piece, the final phase of this. This is all old stuff. You already went through it. You guys follow these requirements. And at the end of your first phase, you should have something that looks like this. And now it's about the arrangement piece, taking the raw material and seeing what we can create. Here's an example. This is where we'll end up at the end of this lesson, but let's look at how we get there. So as far as arranging goes, here we go. There's a couple of suggestions I want to make for you just to make this a little bit more manageable. So the first thing is the first line, looking at all of the content that you have grabbed, all the lines that you liked, all the phrases that you found. Now it's about, okay, what is going to be a good first line from this? And this is an important line. It's important because it's the first line that can make or break the reading experience for a reader. Would it be nice if a reader committed more time and not just the first opening line to something before they made a decision on whether they like it or not? That would be nice, but we don't live in the world of nice. We live in the world of we need to be entertained very quickly. So get it done in that first line. But be picky and be intentional about this line. It shouldn't be random. Uh, Another suggestion is your last line, and you can actually flip these. Sometimes it's easier to choose a last line than it is the first, but what's the final thought you want in your reader's mind? What feeling do you want to leave them with? So of all that you found, what would be a good candidate for either a first line or a last line? And the other thing you want to think about too is poets have to make constant decisions of when they're going to stop a line. It's very common to think that the line of a poem stops with a period, and that actually isn't true. We saw that in our different examples of blackout poems. And if you open any poetry book, you'll see that a line of a poem isn't necessarily ending at the end of, sorry, a full sentence, a full idea isn't ending at the end of the line. Sometimes a poet will decide to break a line or break a sentence in a couple of lines. We'll talk more about that in the third phase of this. But you want to be identifying natural stopping points for a thought. Lines may already have a period ending a thought, but you may have to decide where you want a thought to end. You may only want a part of a sentence that you grabbed and just get rid of the rest. And this is true when it comes to creating anything. You have to kill the ones you love. You may find a beautiful line that's just not fitting. You may have to cut it and save it for something else. Don't force it to fit. It's like you thinking you have the piece of the jigsaw puzzle that fits in this one spot, and you keep pushing, you keep pushing, you keep pushing, you end up breaking the piece and distorting the image of the entire jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, so don't do that. It could still be a beautiful line and not be included in your final product just because it's struggling to fit. And then in this phase, as well as the last, you want to continue to leave breadcrumbs to follow. You want to keep track of the page numbers you're gathering the lines from and including those at the end of the line. So for any of us who have done any kind of creative adventure, it is messy. It's going to be messy. That's why I like this image here. And So give yourself permission for it to still be messy. Again, you're using Scotch tape. You're not using super glue. You're not using duct tape. So you still have time to think about how to arrange this, but we're at least beginning the arranging phase here. So this is on your handout for today, but as far as the rubric goes, the specifics, the specs that I'm looking for with this is firstly the number of pages you're pulling from. So I'm asking a minimum of 10 pages that you're using from your entire novel. And notice I am bolding and underlining and putting a weird bracket there for some reason. Do not use consecutive pages. In other words, I shouldn't see this line is from page 10, this line is from page 11, this line is from page 12. No, don't do that. If you do that, you are going to lose the element of disguise. It is way easier for a reader to guess the original source if you only use consecutive pages, and it tells me you probably rushed the assignment as well. So don't do that. Again, going back to our last lesson, you don't want to spoil it either. You don't want to spoil your reading experience. Try to stay away from those passages of the book that you have not read yet. Think of it as the West Wing from Beauty and the Beast. Don't go in there. So that still is true, but also don't keep yourself into this tiny confined space of the pages that you're using, because the element of disguise is still important to maintain. Next, you're going to be expected to have at least 50 words in your poem, so keep that in mind. 50 or more is what we're going for. And Sense and Sensibility, one of my favorite Jane Austen stories, great Victorian film starring Hugh Grant and Emma Watson. But anyway, the poem is sensible. It is effectively written around a central theme, mood, tone, theme. Once you finish this whole thing, once you get through phase 3, you're going to actually have to analyze your own poem. So you want to make sure that this thing actually makes sense. Even Dr. Seuss's nonsensical poems, they still had intentionality behind them. They were still leading the reader somewhere. We shouldn't, as a reader of your poem, we shouldn't feel like we are, I don't know, in bumper boats or in the, what are they, bumper cars? That's what they're called, where you're just getting knocked again and again. We're going this way, now we're going this way, now we're going this way. No, you don't want to do that. So you want to make sure that this is analyzable at the end of it. And your conclusion, the poem has a clear one. It doesn't just leave the reader, woo, there's a cliff and off you go, reader. Thanks for hanging out with me for these 50 plus words and 10 plus lines. No, your conclusion should be intentional. It shouldn't just feel like your poem just ended with no sense of closure. And I've said this word already in this lesson, intentionality. You want this to feel intentional. The way I define that is thought is evident in terms of how the poem is structured, stanzas, line lengths. We'll get more into stanzas and line lengths for our third and final phase. But in other words, it's clear that you, the poet, didn't rely upon the default settings of Microsoft Word or Google Docs to determine the structure of the poem. Those applications will decide you're ending the line here, but a poet never allows a computer to decide when the line is ending. That is their decision, not machines. And just a word of caution on this, something to think about, guys, is one of the challenges right now in being asked to write poetry and think like a poet is that we haven't actually read poetry together as a class. It's often the last genre that students will choose to read because of our lack of familiarity with it. The truth is that this phase becomes much more enjoyable if you at least give yourself some time to explore and see if you can put yourself in front of some poetry and absorb what's happening. So like with anything, you got to spend time with the genre if you're going to be able to write effectively in the genre. So there's some great resources. I'm actually going to post some poetry videos on our Canvas page that they're actually poetry illustrations. I'll actually show the poem itself with you, but these are readers of this particular poet who've taken his poems and animated them, and they're really beautiful pieces in and of itself as the animation, but also look at the poem itself to just see the structure and where the poet, in this case his name is Billy Collins, where the poet actually decides to break up the lines. And so with that, I want to take you to your handout for today. Let me pull it up on the screen, part 2, here it is. So here's our handout to kind of guide and just readdress what I've already talked about. And I love this quote from Robert Frost, one of the most popular American poets. Poetry is when an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found words. Again, this idea of discovery, an emotion discovering itself through words. And those words then can be shared between people, and we understand and feel more as humans because that's who we are. So anyway, this is just me taking you through what we already talked about, the pointers for this phase. Also, there's the rubric. I included that on your lesson that we already went over. And also on the backside on page 2, you will see my phase 1. And you've already seen this in our last assignment. And you'll also see phase 2. Phase 2 is where you're starting to see how I'm making decisions of where things are going. You'll also notice on this that I'm playing around with the idea of where to insert some stanza breaks. Remember, this is a poem. We're not writing paragraphs. Poems are structured in stanzas. So I'm just kind of playing around with where I think that some of my stanzas should be broken up, because you're going to be expected to do the same. So anyway, I hope that's helpful for you guys. Again, message me if you have any questions. Meanwhile, I'll just be here under the sea. Under the sea. Darling, it's better down where it's wetter. Take it from me. Yeah, I know I have to work on my Jamaican accent. Sebastian would not be proud, but hey, you're welcome. Talk to you guys soon.